Hey everyone, and welcome. So today we're tackling a really cool topic, ISO 56002. Now stick with me here, because this is all about how you can take innovation from something that feels like a total roll of the dice and turn it into a predictable, manageable system for growth. Let's dive in.
Does this sound familiar to you? You've got great ideas popping up all over the place, and projects get started with all this energy, but there's no real system to it. It kind of feels like you're playing the innovation lottery, right? Just buying a bunch of tickets and hoping one of them finally hits the jackpot. It's super common, but man, it's also really inefficient and honestly pretty stressful. But what if you could change that? What if you could stop relying on just pure luck or happy accidents? Well, that is exactly what ISO 56002 is all about. It gives you a structure, a way to make innovation a deliberate, repeatable process that's baked right into your business.
So what is this thing really? Think of ISO 56002 as a set of guidelines, or maybe better yet, a blueprint for building your own innovation management system. The whole point is to bring consistency, to cut down on all that randomness we talked about, and, this is key, to make sure your innovation efforts are actually aligned with your big picture business strategy. Okay, this is a really important distinction we have to make right away. This is not a certification standard like ISO 9001, where you have to pass a test. ISO 56002 is a guidance framework, so it's not some rigid rule book you have to follow to the letter. It's more like an architect's blueprint that you can adapt to build an innovation system that actually fits your organization. So how do you actually use this blueprint? Well, the easiest way to get your head around it is with a classic management cycle that's been adapted specifically for innovation, the plan, do, check, act cycle. It's a really simple but powerful loop for getting better and better over time. It all breaks down into 4 main stages. First, you plan your strategy. Then you do the actual work. Then you check your results to see what happened. And finally, you act on what you learned to improve the whole process. Let's walk through each one. Everything, and I mean everything, starts with the plan. This is your foundation. This is where you make sure your innovation goals are actually supporting the company's main strategy. It's where you figure out who's responsible for what, get your leadership team fully committed, and, take a hard look at your environment with things like a SWOT analysis. Next up is the do phase. This is where the rubber meets the road. You're building the engine here. This means setting up a real pipeline to capture new ideas, having clear criteria to decide which ones are worth pursuing, and putting real resources behind them. We're talking dedicated budgets and actual portfolio management. This is how ideas start becoming reality. Then we check. There's an old saying, you can't improve what you don't measure, and it's absolutely true. This step is all about defining what success even looks like for you. Are you setting clear KPIs? Are you scheduling regular reviews to see how you're tracking? And crucially, are you learning from what works, and maybe even more importantly, from what doesn't? And finally, we act. This is the part that makes the whole system get smarter over time. You create these feedback loops so that everything you learned in the check phase gets fed right back into how you plan and do things next time. This is how you stop making the same mistakes and start seeing how you stack up against the best in the business. But look, a framework of processes and tools, that's only half the battle. A system is just a machine, right? It's only as good as the people operating it. And that's why the next piece of the puzzle is so critical. Building a culture that actually breathes life into this system. I absolutely love this line from the source material because it's so true. This isn't about creating some siloed innovation department off in a corner. The real goal is to weave innovation into the very fabric of your organization, to embed it right into your management DNA, so it's just part of how you operate. So how do you do that? Well, it always starts at the top. It's one thing for leaders to say they support innovation. It's another thing entirely for them to demonstrate it by putting real money and resources on the table and by personally sponsoring projects. When people see that, they know it's not just talk. Next, you have to create an environment where it's okay to take smart risks. That's what psychological safety is all about. It means your team members feel like they can toss out a wild idea or admit an experiment failed without any fear of being blamed or punished. That freedom is what unlocks real creativity. And finally, innovation just thrives when people connect. You gotta break down those walls between departments. When the engineering team is actually talking with the marketing folks and the sales team, the quality of ideas just goes through the roof. That collaboration is the fuel for your innovation engine. Okay, so now that we have this whole framework in mind, we can ask a really practical question.
How do you figure out where your organization is right now on this journey? Well, the standard gives us a pretty simple model to help with that. Just look at this maturity scale. It goes from 1 to 5. Level 1 is, well, you've got nothing. Level 2 is that innovation lottery we talked about at the start. It's totally ad hoc and unpredictable. But as you move up, you start to get a defined process, then a managed and measured system, until finally you reach level 5, which is a fully optimized best practice innovation engine. It's a really clear journey from chaos to system. At the end of the day, ISO 5602 is basically a map. It shows you how to get from random acts of innovation to having a predictable engine for growth. So the real question isn't just, where are you on this map today? It's also, where could this blueprint take you? And maybe more importantly, what's the cost of just staying put? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.